So today we're going to change the oil on the 2019 Voyager. And before we do, I'm going to talk to you about some of the tools that you're going to need. This is really easy and kind of a shame to pay a dealer to do this when you can really do it yourself relatively quickly, okay? So the first thing you're going to need to change the oil is oil. Castrol PowerTech 10W50. Now, I've been running 10W40 in this, and this is really only this bike's third oil change. We're at 8,000 miles right now, and we've been doing 10W40, but if you look in the owner's manual, 10W50 has a wider range of temperature. So where I live, it gets hot. We sit in traffic sometimes, and that 10W50 is going to protect it better. And there's nothing wrong with 10W40 if that's what you go with. But I came across this, and it has the Castrol 10W40 in it now. And it's been doing really well, okay? So the next thing is you're going to need a filter. There's the part number. And this was purchased on Amazon for, I think, about 12 bucks, okay? So you're going to need a little tool set here. A lot of you probably already have these tools if you do any garage work. And these are pretty easy to come by. A torque wrench, and we'll get to why you need that later. And then some strap wrenches to get the filter off. Last time I pulled the filter off, and I'm going to show you where it is here. The filter is on the right side of the motorcycle, right on the bottom, okay? And that's what you're looking at there. The last time I had to pull this thing off, I had to stick a screwdriver through it and turn it. It was super tight and not really fun to get off. And it's tough to get anything on it with a good grip because of you got something on the the right side as we look from it here, the frame on the left, and it was definitely a challenge. Okay, so filter, oil, and all the tools we need, we've got them, and we're gonna do this. So now, when you're talking about where you got two bolts, and where these bolts are on the bottom of the engine. You've got, let's see here, one there and one there, okay? And those are your two oil drain bolts. Both of those do have to come out, okay? The last thing I recommend is a motorcycle oil drain pan, and that's this right here. These are really helpful for getting under the motorcycle, because ones for cars are going to be too tall. You're going to have to get this bike up really high in order to get those under. This is really thin. Again, bought that on Amazon for about, I think it was 45 or 50 bucks. Okay. All right, well, let's get going. Okay, so we've unscrewed our dipstick, and we're looking right down on it right now. And we do that because you want some air to get into the case. That way it doesn't prevent oil from fully leaking out. So we've got the oil drain pan in place. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to pull out the two bolts we referenced before and let the oil drain. Now you'll hear that the bike, by all the clicking and tapping, is cooling off right now. You do not want to do this with the engine oil cold. So I let this run for about 10 minutes, let it get up to temperature. Oil's going to flow out a lot easier. With that being said, make sure you're careful because the oil is going to be well over 100 degrees. So watch your hands when you're doing this, okay? Because you could burn yourself, especially if you did this like after riding. It would be very warm. So we will continue on. All right, so we've got our back bolt pulled out, and you'll see the oil is flowing out very nicely. And that's that oil's got 4,000 miles on it, and it's pretty dark, which is kind of what we expected. So if you don't want to buy a whole tool set, it is an 18 millimeter to pull that out, okay? We still have a bolt in the front, you can kind of see there, and that still needs to get pulled out. Because of the flow rate, I do one at a time. That way we don't overwhelm this system and cause it to overflow. But you'll see the bolt Came out very nicely. And we will move on to our next one. Okay, so our oil is just about drained out. You'll see it's draining from both spots right now. So let's talk about putting these bolts back in, because we're getting to the point where we can do that. This manual calls for 13 foot-pounds of force to put these back in. Now, it is very hard, unless you are a professional and you turn a wrench every day for a living, to know what 15 foot-pounds is. And it's real easy to get in here and torque these down like you're putting your lug nuts on. Don't be a dummy here, okay? These go directly into the engine case. If you round them out, you are in trouble. So get yourself a cheap torque wrench, something that works. You know, if you buy the snap-on version, yeah, it probably will cost you as much as the bike. But these do not, okay? I got this at either Harbor Freight or Northern Tool for probably $30. And it works just fine for this kind of stuff. One other thing to pay attention to, and these will normally fall off, but these are your, it's like a crush washer that creates a seal, but they'll often fall off. They kind of stay there for a bit when you first pull the bolt off, but gravity wins after some time and they end up falling down. So make sure they don't go into your pan, you lose them. It would not be fun to have to get those back. But our oil is about drained now, and we're going to put these back in. 15 foot-pounds, very important. All right, so there's probably some of you who might be going, well, man, a torque wrench sounds like we just complicated this, right? I need some kind of engineering degree in order to do this. Good news, you don't. You see this right here? Foot-pounds. You literally turn the bottom handle, you spin it until you put it on the mark you want, and then you set it, okay? And you're like, well, how do I know? How do I know when I have the right foot-pounds? Well, the good news is the torque wrench will tell you. Listen, when you hear that, you are at the torque setting you need, okay? Torque wrenches are not complicated. They even make digital ones if you're not sure. So, easy enough. We got these set at 15 pounds. Let me spin us here. Okay. Both of our bolts are back on. And one thing I'll say too, when you put your bolts back in, get a rag and wipe up in there a bit. That way that oil's not left. And I'm going to end up doing it again, because oil has a nasty way of dust, dirt, and debris sticking to it. And it might even give you the wrong idea that you have leaks underneath the motorcycle, okay? Because that'll start to grab dirt and dust and it starts to look bad. So when you're done, make sure that that spatter of oil is all wiped up on your bike. All right, we will move on to the oil filter. All right, so we talked about the challenges of the tight fit for getting to that that oil filter. And through the years of working on things, I have acquired just about every tool, and this is not even all of them, for pulling oil filters off. And the one we did not want to use is when you stick a screwdriver through, which is what I had to do last time, and slowly turn it by puncturing it. So what worked, so this didn't work, strap wrench won't fit, chain wrench, not even close. This little guy right here fit. And this is a nice tool because it goes onto the filter, and then as you turn, it actually gets tighter. And this did successfully loosen the filter. So we've got the filter here, and I should have it almost, well, not quite. Might need to go a little more on this. It was turning. Oh, actually, here it goes. It's starting to go. Let's see if we can finagle it off the rest of the way. Okay. So we got it here. And you should start to see oil, and it is. You see oil dripping? So make sure to move your oil pan because there's going to be quite a bit of oil in the filter. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and pull that off. All right, so we've got the new filter back on, but I just want to talk about something here. in regards to putting it back on. And that is, the manual calls for 13 foot-pounds. The only problem is, because of how tight the area is for putting the filter in, you can't exactly get a torque wrench in there with much success. So what I would say is 13 foot-pounds. You know, you really need to be careful here. It's just a little bit beyond hand tight, but you probably will need to use a tool to do it, because you can't really get your hand in there. And this tool worked pretty well, and it had a good enough grip on it to be able to get it back on. So the sad thing is really to get it on and off. I mean, this may work in some circumstances for on and off. Today it didn't. So 13 foot-pounds isn't much, but you know, you can't really get a torque wrench in there. So you kind of have to use some common sense. And just remember back here, 15 foot-pounds, what that felt like, and then, you know, go a little less on this. You know, this, even putting them on a car, you know, you can kind of go by hand a little bit beyond hand tight, and that's really all you need. So do not over tighten that or feel like you need to wrench that down. The last thing is, there is a gasket on your new oil filter, and you'll see the old one on here. Get some of the oil and make sure you lube that up. And it just involves taking your finger and going around it like that, and do that before you put it on. Okay, and it really helps the seat, that gasket, against the housing. Okay, so we have got the drain bolts back in. We've got the oil filter torqued down, and the last thing we need to do is fill the bike with oil. And then we will let it run for a bit and then check the oil. A couple things, when you're checking the oil on the motorcycle, after you have filled it, you want to make sure that you let it idle. And don't be blipping the throttle, because you're going to start to put oil into the filter and it's going to change your reading. It's probably going to make it seem low. So when we're putting oil in the bike, now I said that those were all the tools you needed, but it wasn't true. You actually need one of these. Okay, this funnel will help you get the oil in there without spilling it all over the engine case and causing a mess. Before you put any oil through these, especially if you have an old one you've been using and it's sat for a while, they have a nasty way of collecting dust and debris inside. Make sure, and you'll see this one is nice and shiny, make sure you clean these things really good, because anything inside of them when you're pouring the oil through is going to potentially go into your engine case. So make sure you clean these really good. And what I normally do, so it says 4.3 without the filter, 5 quarts with an oil change, with a filter change. So what I do is I normally go 4 quarts pretty rapidly, and then the last quart, or getting closer to 5, I start being a little more careful and start checking my oil. Make sure that you check your oil with the bike upright. And once you get close, I would let it run for a bit. You'll probably find it might go down a little bit. But again, it's very important that you let the bike idle and not be revving the throttle, because it starts putting oil in places that can throw off your reading. So the oil will go into the bike at the dipstick. Okay. One thing I'll say about the Kawasaki dipstick is it gets hot. When you grab the top where my fingers are. So you'll see you've got 2 lines there, one at the top, one at the bottom, and then some gray area there. Your oil could be anywhere between there. So when I'm filling it, once it gets about halfway on, I don't know how well this is looking at it here. Once it gets about halfway up that, then I'll start, and once I know I have over 4 quarts in it, 4.5 quarts, then I'll go ahead and run it, and then we'll check it. But make sure your bike is level when you're checking the oil, and after it runs, let it sit for a little bit to let the oil settle a bit, and then make sure the bike is level. And this is a dipstick where you do need to screw it down in order to get your reading. Okay, so don't just stick it in there, pull it back out, and go, oh, the oil's low. No, you need to screw it in, and then unscrew it, and then check your oil. Okay. Okay, so we have finished, and we're back over here at the dipstick. Everything is good to go. Get that little leaf out of there. It ended up taking about 4.7, 4.8 quarts. Now, when I was throwing out capacity, as far as the oil goes, I was a little off. It is 4.3 without a filter change, and 4.5 with a filter change, and then 5.3 with the engine completely dry. So We got a little bit more than 4.5 out, obviously, because it took about 4.8, and it looks really good. The level is like about midway on the dipstick, and I think some of that had to do with, like, when I change the oil, I give the bike a little bit of a left lean, and that way I think it helps drain the oil out a little bit better, so we get a little bit more out. And I think the manual kind of assumes that you're doing it with the bike level. So anyways, we're done. Just remember, when you're checking your oil after you do this, do not go for a ride. Don't rev it. Don't touch the throttle at all. Let it idle for a couple minutes, and then let it sit for a couple minutes, and then come back and check to see where your oil is. If you do anything other than that, you are not going to get an accurate read. Okay, these Kawasaki 1700 engines, you can't just go for a ride, and while you're out on the ride, start checking the oil. There is a procedure for doing this, and if you do it wrong, it's going to give you a reading that will more than likely make you put more oil in the bike than it needs. Okay, so make sure you follow that process, and it is outlined in the manual. So anyways, we are done. We put 10W50 Castrol motorcycle full synthetic oil, and like I said, about 4.7 quarts is where we ended up. And so that's it. If you're wondering if you can do this, the answer is yes. Remember, the main tool you'll need is a ratchet with an 18mm to get the bolts off, 15 foot-pounds when you put the oil drain bolts back on. Okay, so easy enough. Any questions, feel free. I'm sorry if I moved the camera around too much. If you're unhappy with this video, I will give you a full refund for what it cost you to watch it. So what is that? You get what you pay for. Anyways, safe riding. Thanks for watching.